if a story can help Mr. Ratan Tata, and I'm 100% sure that stories and storytelling can help all other entrepreneurs.
This Indian dude is going to visit 12 countries in 12 months and do 12 things that scare him. Whose story is this one?
My in the era where there is chat GPT, AI and all of that, I think people who have a unique voice and the ability to say things that only they can say are the ones who will be considered great communicators, or are the ones who will be considered great leaders by people as well.
If you want to be narrating your stories and connect emotionally with your audiences, you need to tell stories, and that's why you need to listen to this episode. Hello and welcome all to yet another episode of The Branding Circle by Ankit Majethia. Today, we are going to discuss about a very interesting topic which is close to our hearts since our childhoods. Yes, and it is about storytelling. We all have heard about different stories and we all have been fascinated by the outcomes of the stories that we've heard. Yeah. But today we are going to talk about something different. Storytelling in business, storytelling for brands. And to talk about it today, I have a very interesting personality and a dear friend. He's a renowned storytelling coach, an experience of more than 2 decades and working with, I think, more than 100 plus brands and coaching entrepreneurs and corporates and their teams on storytelling. Today we have Sachin Bhandary, the founder of the Story Co. So let's all together welcome Sachin Bhandary to our podcast today. So hey, hi Sachin, welcome to the Branding Circle.
Thank you, Ankit. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Sachin. Firstly, thank you so much for accepting the invitation and coming over to discuss. I know this is a topic that is close to your heart, and you can go about it for hours and hours, right? But today I want you to start a little different.
Right.
Can you tell us a story about why should people watch this episode today?
Right. Ankit, first of all, thanks for the invitation. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I know I'm probably one of the first few guests of this podcast. And I was super excited when you asked me to become a part of this. And incidentally, though I have a radio show and I share a lot of content online, write on LinkedIn fairly regularly, and I also write for publications. This is my first podcast. So it's a format that I've always loved. In fact, I listen to podcasts very regularly, and a lot of my learnings are actually from podcasts of business leaders, of startup founders. And I'm just happy that the first podcast that I'm doing is with a dear friend like you. So thanks. And with that, the question that you asked me, why should somebody listen to this podcast and how I can convince someone using a story.
And especially this episode.
Specifically this episode, right? I think, the anecdote that comes to my mind, Ankit, is I've read somewhere that when Ratan Tata decided to launch the Nano project, he went to his team and he wanted people to start working on this particular project. It was a $2,500 car. Yeah. His team was not very excited because they knew that it was going to be very challenging. Plus, because cars are, probably what was the undoing of the Nano eventually. Cars are a matter of prestige. Nobody wanted to work on a car which was sub 1 lakh or sub $2,500. So people were hesitant. And it is said that that's when Ratan Tata decided to narrate the story of why and how the idea came to him. He was traveling in Bangalore one day and he was in his car, and right in front of his car, there was a family of 4 who were on a scooter, on a two-wheeler, and they fell onto the ground. So Mr. Tata actually stepped out of his car, helped them back onto the road. And when he came back into the car, he started thinking that, India has so many families, husband, wife, 2 kids or 3 kids. And they, because of, economic reasons, cannot afford a car. And they always put themselves or their safety at risk because of that. And he started doodling a design and he thought that maybe we should do half a car, a 3-wheeler, etc., etc. But then he said that no, you need to give a proper car to the everyday Indian and give them a ride of dignity and safety. And this is the story that he narrated to his team. And it is said that the team, after that, once they realized that Mr. Tata wanted to build India's people's car, they completely got behind him and started working on the project, making it their own. So, if a story can help Mr. Ratan Tata, and I'm 100% sure that stories and storytelling can help all other entrepreneurs. And that's why I think people should tune into this particular episode of the Branding Circle.
Superb. So, people, you've got your answer, right? If you want to be narrating your stories and connect emotionally with your audiences, you need to tell stories, and that's why you need to listen to this episode.
Right.
Perfect. So, Sachin, getting to your story now.
Right.
Yeah. What is that one thing that brought you into this industry or this concept of storytelling? And why did you choose this?
It's been an interesting journey, Ankit. I mean, there's a long answer to it and there's a short answer to it as well. The short answer is that I worked in public relations for almost 8 years.
Okay.
Worked with a lot of good brands. And in fact, I used to manage the PR team, the corporate reputation and brand publicity for almost all of Godrej Group brands,
Okay.
the ones which are handled by Adi Godrej. So Godrej Industries and its associated companies.
Yeah.
Worked on brands like Hotels.com, got BBC World News to the agency that I worked in. Had a very good career. Of course, you have challenges, ups and downs, but it was a very rewarding career. And I then quit my job to travel the world because that's something that I wanted to do as a teenager. And I thought that if I don't start doing it at the age of 32, I may never be able to do it. So I quit and I traveled for about a year and a half, and I became a travel journalist during that time. And I was writing for Nat Geo, Mint Lounge, and a lot of other publications, which I had always dreamt of doing. I came back from the trip in June of 2016, and I continued to write. But because I was not able to make the kind of money I was making while I was in PR, I took up an offer from a really interesting startup from Sri Lanka called Roar Global to start their operations in India. We ran that for about a year and a half, but again, we were not able to raise the kind of revenue or build the kind of revenue that the investors were expecting. And the founder of the company was in a lot of pressure. So I told him that I think you should just shut down the operations here in India and focus on the markets that you're doing really well in, which is Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And so that was end of 2018. So here I was about I guess I was 36 if I'm not wrong that time. I had done a lot of interesting things, but I really didn't know what I was going to do next. It was almost like I had hit a wall.
So this was 4 years after you left your job.
Yes, around 4 years. So 2015, you can say I left my job. 15, about 4 years after I left my job. Going back to PR wasn't an option because, I mean, I continue to love PR and do PR in many different ways, and I used to do it. But being a part of the PR industry is something that I did not envisage for myself. So I was now looking at what do I do? So I said, I'm not going to commit to anything unless and until I know that it's something that I'm good at, I enjoy doing, and something that the market wants from me as well. So there were these three things. I mean, you could probably call it Ikigai. Ikigai is a term that I realized later that a lot of people told me, oh, your approach is like Ikigai and stuff. So I said, okay, fine.
Can you explain Ikigai for our audience today in 30 seconds?
It's fairly simple. I think, like I said, it's basically about something, finding the overlap between something that you are good at, something that you enjoy, and something that the market or people want from you. So people are willing to pay you for. So if you draw these three circles, the overlap of all these three circles towards the middle, towards the center, is basically your Ikigai, which is what you should pursue, because we have 10 things that we might be interested in, right? We might love doing, I don't know, gardening or whatever. But are you going to make money as a gardener? Probably not, or at least not the kind of money that you would like to. Then you have to figure out what else. So you figure out what is it that will help you make money, want to make you pursue your passion and something that you are good at as well. Just because you're passionate about something, just because you're passionate about guitar does not necessarily mean you'll be a great guitarist. You may be average, you may be okay. So all these three things put together is Ikigai.
So I think this is an amazing learning, not only for founders or startup entrepreneurs, but also for the Gen Z of today, right? Because they are finding it really difficult to figure out their ways into the profession and what they like, how they like, what they enjoy.
Right.
So wonderful insights. Yeah. So back to your story.
So in 2019, I told myself that I'm going to focus. I'm not going to commit to anything. I'm going to do small experiments. And try to figure out where is this Ikigai. Didn't know the term back then, like I said. And so I did cycle tours in Bombay, which did well. Cycle tours.
Okay, cycle tours.
So I used to host a cycle tour experiences on Airbnb, and I used to take people to Worli and Dadar on cycles. I used to do really well. Actually, people used to pay 1,500, 2,000 for a 2 to 3 hour ride. But 2-3 months of doing it, I realized that I won't be able to scale it up. Or even if I had to scale it, then I have to actually start multi-city tours and stuff like that. And for some reason, it wasn't something that appealed to me. I also did long distance tours, took people on 3-4 day journeys as well. But what I realized in the course is that while I love cycling, for me, long distance cycling is a form of meditation. But when it comes to me handling people and managing their experience, I'm not the best person to do it. Because that's not what I'm in for, So I said, if something is not something that I'd like to do myself, how can I build a business around that? So that was out of the way. So I struck that out. And so I was also asking people, what is it that you think I'm good at and what would you pay me for? So a lot of people told me, Sachin, if you teach communication, whether it's public speaking, whether it's writing, whether it's, how to build brand strategy, brand communication, things like that, I'm sure we'd love to learn from you and pay you for it. So that's how the idea of becoming a coach and a trainer came about in communications. But I still wanted something which was not necessarily completely unique, but at least slightly unique, right? And I stumbled upon a talk in February 2020 on business storytelling. And I didn't even know that the term existed. Though a lot of the things that I always...
This talk was by whom?
This talk was by Amin Haq. He's arguably the best known business storytelling coach in India. He's also a good friend and a mentor, someone who's actually helped me in my journey.
Super.
So I saw his talk on YouTube. And I knew that this was something that I really wanted to do. And I had a feeling that I would be good at it because those were tips or techniques that I was already telling people.
Right.
Those were things that I was already following in my own communication and things like that. So that's how business storytelling happened, Ankit.
Super. And so how many years into business storytelling and coaching now after you left your job?
So we started the company, or rather announced the start of the company on 2nd April 2020.
Okay.
So this was like, I think a week.
In the lockdown, yeah?
Yeah. It was March 25th, I think, is when the lockdown was announced.
20th or 25th sometimes.
It was 25th, I remember the date. And I had already decided on the company. The website was almost done. And the lockdown happened. And I still went ahead and announced that we are starting the company and... the website was ready. I made the announcement on 2nd of April only because on 1st of April, people would have thought that Sachin is fooling us. One more thing that Sachin is starting, because a lot of my friends and people around me were like, Sachin, every 2 years, he starts something new. So I didn't want people to feel that, okay, he's doing some kind of a Fool's Day prank. But yeah, so since then, so that's April 2020 now. We are a little over 4 years, right? Into the journey.
So you passed those 2 years benchmark that your friends
Yes, I have. Yes, I should congratulate myself for that.
Good. And also, I think something that no one could have thought of doing, right? But when you've just entered a lockdown and you have no certainty about where you would be going, how long this lockdown would last, but you started something on your own.
Right. See, when the lockdown was announced, I don't think anybody thought that it will go on for so long. So, I mean, wisdom in hindsight, I just thought that maybe it'll go on for a few months and
Mm.
it'll be okay after that. But in a way, I think lockdown helped me in many ways
Mm.
because of the lockdown, all of the work was happening online, which meant that
Yeah.
there was a lot of time at hand comparatively, right? Like now you travel a lot, you commute.
Yeah.
I'm now traveling to Bombay for work, etc., which takes up a substantial amount of time. But the first 2 years, I had enough time on hand,
Correct.
which meant that I was able to apply myself and to learn. So one part is whatever I had learned through my own journey in PR and communications, as a journalist, as a writer, as a
Yeah.
PR professional. Of course, I had learned a lot along the way. But again, to go back to books, to understand things and techniques from a classic form, like how people actually put methods to all of these communication, is what I was able to do during those 2 years. So I think it helped me in a big way that I was able to actually sit down and study and become a good student of storytelling before I actually started taking up bigger projects.
So you were a practitioner of communication. You taught different people how to communicate better, and then you applied the frameworks of storytelling onto it, which helped you, right?
100%, yes. So, yeah, so my belief when it comes to storytelling, I even to this day, so though I'm a coach and a trainer, and I think bulk of my work actually is about either coaching someone or training corporate teams or executives and things like that. But I still try to make time to actually do projects where I myself am implementing something.
Okay.
And because I believe that anything new that I'm learning, uh, to be able to teach others, first I need to implement that and see for myself whether it actually works or not.
Can you give any recent example of this?
A
A project that you're working on.
So an interesting project is we have a long stay service apartment in Mysore.
Right.
We named it Story States, run by my family.
Okay.
So Story Co is the coaching and training
Correct.
company. Story Stay is the accommodation company. Now the entire idea, while I think we are still about 50% there, we still have to do do the rest of the 50% journey. The idea of Story Stay is that people get attracted to the place because of its stories and of the people who run the place. So stories of the place, but also of the people who run the place, and also making space for guests to be able to exchange stories about their own lives and have conversations. Now, I think it happens well in the hostel format, which is essentially for people who are in their early 20s or probably early 30s tak theek hai.
Correct.
But generally what happens once you go to the age of 35, 40 plus, where you have a family and kids, you are in places where it's just about the accommodation, right? But our idea is that we as a family are available to our guests. We talk to them, we have conversations. We have many people who have actually come to Mysore and stayed with us because they want to make Mysore their home.
Okay.
Because they've heard about our story that
so they want
we
to
are a
experience
family.
Mysore.
We are a family which moved from Bombay to Mysore. So they are coming down. So all of those things that I'm learning in storytelling as to how to use your stories to attract the right kind of people towards your business is something that I've implemented in Story Stay. Also making space for conversation. What are conversations, right? Conversations are essentially where you exchange stories. Stories are pretty much the oil which runs this machine called conversations.
Correct.
So those are the things that I have implemented at Story Stay, and I can attest to the fact that while a lot of the bookings do come from people who are just looking for a great place to stay. By great place, I mean to say a clean place, has good Wi-Fi, and
the necessities of today, right? Good Wi-Fi.
yeah, that's right. But there are many also who look at our stories and look at the stories that other guests have narrated about our family.
Okay.
And because of that, they come. Like, for instance, I think about 15 to 20, if not more, 15 to 20% of the bookings come because of our pet dog, Kiki.
Oh.
And because she's such a, how do I call it? A force in our conversations, in our reviews, in our pictures, and everywhere else. That there are a lot of people who book our place only because they want to come and meet her. And sometimes I feel that if businesses are able to showcase some of these aspects about themselves, they will be able to attract better customers. So yeah, I mean, everything that I'm learning, I think in some ways I implemented in the story stage, but also I help some brands, the ones
Okay.
who are at a stage where they are able to invest the right kind of money for getting me on board. I develop their brand stories on my own
Okay.
rather than just coaching them. So
Okay.
that's also
Okay.
something that I do.
And then now, what is the future of the StoryCo? Where are you heading towards?
Future of the StoryCo, I started this, Ankit, with the idea that I wanted to build a community, because I was a part of Toastmasters for about 7 years. Toastmasters is a public
Would you like to
speaking.
mention what is Toastmasters? Because not everyone must be familiar about
100%,
it.
100%. So, Toastmasters is a public speaking and leadership development community.
Okay.
It's a not-for-profit, and it has different chapters, just like different clubs
Yeah.
and all that, where you actually go and attend the club. You get a chance to speak almost every other week, and you go through certain modules, and you prepare your speeches. So,
Okay.
over a period of time, you become a better communicator, or mostly a better public speaker because of Toastmasters. So I was a part of of that community. Used to go to this club called Mumbai Toastmasters in Bandra for about 7 years, and I think I owe a lot to Toastmasters in terms of my public speaking skills. Also, I've made a lot of great friends. So community is something that I've always believed in. I mean, of course, we are a part of BNI as well. I've now spent about 2 years in BNI, and I think that offline communities, that's something that really helps people make a lot of progress in life. And all of us need that third place. Like you would have heard that Starbucks, that's their intention, right? That they want to be the third place between home, office. There has to be a third place. I also believe that between your friends, family, and your workplace, your network at your workplace, you need a third network.
Okay.
And that third network is something like a BNI or something like a Toastmasters.
Okay.
So that's why I always was gung-ho that I'd like to build a community. But what I realized over the last 3-4 years that I've been doing this is that, theory is great. You will learn a bit from theory.
Okay.
But like any other skill, good communication and storytelling is all about practice.
Yeah.
It's also about getting feedback, because communication is what, unless and until you're getting feedback, whether some of your messages are landing, not landing, etc. But when it comes to professionals, career professionals, or people just like everyday people like you and me, I don't think there's a space for us to get feedback on our communication.
Yeah.
So practice feedback, and also the fact that people need to realize that at any high stakes communication event or any communication event which is important to you, preparation is really important.
Yeah.
But we don't get those opportunities. So how do you do that? I believe community is the answer. So one of the big things I think the StoryCo will turn into in the future, that the community may or may not be called the StoryCo.
Okay.
We are trying to figure out what should be the name. But very soon we are going to launch a community where people come and practice storytelling and communication skills, 90-second stories, which you can either use in leadership.
The elevator pitch is what people generally call
Yeah, you can call it the elevator pitch, but elevator pitch is more to do with pitching, right?
Pitching, business.
Pitching, storytelling is not just about
But the
pitching.
size of a story, probably.
Right. The point is that I've realized after working for so many years is that one thing is that you have a good story to tell, but you also need to have the ability to narrate that story within a certain time frame, even if it is not on social media. Because even in conversations one-to-one, when you're, let's say, talking to a colleague has stopped by and you want to make a certain point to the colleague.
Correct.
If you're going to use a story which takes half an hour for you to narrate, that colleague has already switched off.
Lost
right?
interest.
Even if the story is good, because he might have other things to attend to.
Correct.
That's why how do you narrate really effective stories in 90 seconds with a message? That's the main crux of that community, so that we can help people become better leaders, better founders. Overall, eventually, I believe that the right kind of storytelling and the ability to spot, structure and narrate stories from your own life will also make you a better person. So that's going to be the big thing about the StoryCo. While of course we'll continue to do projects for corporate. So I mean, we've been lucky till now that we've worked with Tata Motors, Bestseller India, Saks Retail, which is a US based retailer, but have their global capability center in Bangalore. And a lot of other corporates that we keep talking to and we are doing work with. Yeah.
So this community that you're wanting to build is majorly, it will help people on practicing their storytelling skills, giving them feedback, and making them a better storyteller. So you mentioned that when you want to build this community, or even Toastmasters who build this community, it also helps you build leadership in you, right? So do you mean to say that storytelling is for leaders, or leaders need to be a good storyteller? What is it?
I think both of them are true. Storytelling is for leaders, but not just for leaders.
Not just for leaders, okay.
And leaders need to be great storytellers. I think both of them are true. Very simple, Ankit. Now, Ratan Tata is a great example. I think he has the ability to narrate good stories and good anecdotes from his journey, which give us a sense or tell us. And one of the challenges that a lot of leaders face is that they are put on a pedestal, right? Either by people or by the organization or because of the title that they have. And when you're put on a pedestal, it is also possible that you lose relatability because everybody thinks that इनको कहाँ पता होगा, इनको कहाँ समझ में आ रहा होगा कि हमारे क्या challenges है, and how is my journey similar to his or hers. So when you have the ability to narrate stories from your own journey is when people find you relatable, which is what someone like Ratan Tata does, or even Girish Mathrubootham from Freshworks. He has the ability to narrate great stories. So for a leader to become relatable, to have the ability to inspire. So how do you inspire? You generally put the spotlight on someone else. How do you connect? By narrating stories from your own life. And how do you explain things? Of course, explaining things would mean that you use techniques like past, present, spotlight, past, present, spotlight, and many different things to be able to explain things in a better way to people. So storytelling, I think, is an essential skill for leaders, because without that, you want people to either work because you're instructing them to, and we already know that this generation...
People don't like to be instructed.
Yeah. And this generation of people, of youngsters who are coming into the workforce, etc., 100% do not want to be instructed.
True.
They either need to be influenced, they need to be inspired, or they need to believe in the mission that you're working on. And if that works, then of course the workforce would want to work with you. And hence I feel that it's an absolute must. And it's something that I think a lot of Indian business leaders lack. It's a crying need. And I think a lot more leaders in India need to wake up to the fact that they need to become better communicators, storytellers. I mean, whatever term you use, that's okay. I know that storytelling also is now become like a buzzword, and a lot of people also have this thing that, everybody calls themselves a storyteller. Nothing wrong with that, because everyone is a storyteller. It's a natural ability and skill that we have. But to be able to use it in business context, or to be able to use it in the context where it serves your purpose, your company's purpose, and also the rightful purpose, storytelling becomes very important.
But I think when you said that especially today's generation doesn't want to be instructed, I think this has been true for many, many generations.
100%,
right?
yes.
I do recall a very interesting story of Martin Luther King Jr. when he was contesting in 1963. He didn't say people just to go and vote, right? He narrated a story why they need to do it. Yeah.
No, 100%, that's right.
I think if you're able to connect emotionally and have a common why, right, that probably solves the puzzle.
Right. Yes, 100%. I think, and also the ability of stories is that you go away from being, it's difficult to appeal to someone's rational side.
Yeah.
uh, no matter how many facts and figures that you share with people,
True.
if people don't feel for a certain topic or a certain thing, they will not actually support you or come on your side. But if you have the ability to make people feel something about that,
Yeah.
make people emotionally invested into something, then there is a higher chance that they will walk with you. And that emotional appeal or that emotional response is something that can come with stories, with the right kind of stories.
Okay, okay. So you told us what kind of stories does a leader need to speak about? Yeah. Do you recollect, or do you have any role model in storytelling for you? A very great leader who is able to connect wonderfully well with his people.
Yes, of course. There are a few, but the one that I would like to share or would like to talk about is Rajiv Bajaj,
Okay.
the chairman.
The Bajaj Motors.
Yeah, chairman and managing
Bajaj,
director
yeah.
of Bajaj Auto.
Bajaj Auto. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's exceptional.
Okay.
Just that he probably is not a part of this generation,
Yeah.
because that's why he's not somebody who already has his own YouTube channel and stuff like that.
Okay.
That is a problem. But otherwise, I mean, problem in the sense that his words and his messages and his stories, I don't think have reached as many people as they can,
Okay.
because of he not investing in the medium. Like if you look at
Okay.
Nikhil Kamath now,
Yeah,
and he has
yeah,
his own
yeah.
podcast and stuff.
Correct.
If Rajiv Bajaj ever starts something
Okay.
where he's speaking regularly, I'm telling you, he will have a lot more fans than any of the. In fact, I would say that he would probably have more fans than most other 10, 15 leaders put together.
Can you give us a story about whatever he's narrated and how we were
so
able to
many of
connect?
them, so many of them. One of my favorite things to do is when there are days when I cook in the morning.
Yeah.
After exercise and stuff like that, I just put on any of Rajiv Bajaj's interviews
Okay.
and I listen to them while I'm cooking.
Wonderful.
There was how does a leader actually communicate his or his organization's values? That's a masterclass by Rajiv Bajaj. I remember in this interview with Outlook Business, he mentioned that so his great grandfather Jamnalal Bajaj actually did not come from wealth. He was not born to a wealthy family. He was born in a poor family.
Yeah.
And when he was 4 years old, he was playing out in the sun. Jamnalal Bajaj,
Okay.
a wealthy merchant by the name of Bachraj Bajaj, was crossing the house.
Okay.
He saw the child and he liked the child, and he just went to the family and said that I'm going to adopt this child. For some reason, they allowed it to happen. Because the reason is that because the child's mother had said, like when Bachraj Bajaj asked कि ये किसका बच्चा है, so the mother responded saying थारो ही है, आपका ही है,
Okay.
right, as a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
And he says कि अच्छा मेरा है तो मैं ही रख लेता हूँ. Now the father of the child could not dispute. He said that we can't dispute this now because we have already given our word that it
Okay.
is your kid, so you can keep it.
Which year was this?
This I don't know the year, but I'm sure this was in the
Because
early.
this won't happen in today's
Of
age, right?
course not. Of course not. So that's how Jamnalal Bajaj
Yeah.
was adopted into this wealthy family,
Mm.
and that's how he sort of started the entire Bajaj business and all of the things that he did. Now the interesting thing is Rajiv Bajaj, when he himself was narrating, got to know this when he was standing at a well, next to a well,
Okay.
in Rajasthan, where they were shooting a documentary about his great grandfather, which is Jamnalal Bajaj. And the person he was hanging out at the well was his watchman in Bombay,
Okay.
of Bajaj Auto. And his name was Sunil, if I remember it correctly. So, and Rajiv Bajaj asked, Sunil, तुम यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो? So Sunil said, छुट्टियों पे आया हूँ, और मैं तो यहीं रहता हूँ, आपके बगल में, आपका पड़ोसी हूँ. मेरे पड़ोसी. So Sunil's family's house was right next to Jamnalal Bajaj's original house, where he was playing
okay.
as a kid and he
Yeah.
was taken in by the wealthy merchant.
Hmm.
So that is when Rajiv Bajaj says he realized that if that afternoon it was not his great grandfather,
Grandfather was
but
playing out.
Sunil's great grandfather
Yeah.
was playing out in the sun, he might as well, Sunil might as well been
Been
the
the-
chairman of Bajaj Auto,
Wow.
and Rajiv Bajaj would have been a watchman
Super.
in Bajaj Auto. And he says that this entire thing
Hmm.
about, I have done this, I have achieved this, and all of this is complete BS according to him.
Okay.
Because he says that luck plays a very important role
I
in
was
our
about to
lives.
come to this. मतलब people think के hard work है तो सब हो जाएगा. But with this story we come to a conclusion, or we probably can understand that luck also plays its role in your
100%. And he says that
success.
within that framework of luck, of course,
Yeah.
you have to work hard, smart,
Correct.
do all of the things that you have.
Yeah.
But you can never ever take away from the fact that there are certain reasons which catapult you towards success,
Hmm.
and there are others which actually keep you away from success. So at the end of the day, all you can do is just put your head down and keep doing your work.
Hmm.
But the point is that, see, with this story, you actually associate this value with the entire Bajaj Auto. So when Rajiv
Yeah.
Bajaj narrates this story of humility, of
Hmm.
how he himself is giving a lot of credit to his luck,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying that, I am somebody who's great and who's achieved all of these
Correct.
things for Bajaj Auto.
Hmm.
You associate the value of humility with the entire group and with the leader. And in fact, I tell my wife this all the time that if there is one person for
Yeah.
whom I'm ready to work for free and I'm ready to change, a lot of my career plans,
Yeah.
then it would be Rajiv Bajaj, because I
So-
really would love to work from the man. This is just one anecdote. There are many more
Wonderful.
in terms of how he's able to narrate stories, his ability. So I've told you about the StoryFlection
Yeah.
process, right?
So I think before you get to that, I think through this podcast, if you're able to connect Sachin to Rajiv Bajaj, I think that would be a good opportunity. If anyone viewing
100%,
this,
100%.
please do that. For
If
me.
not, work with him. Even if I'm able to have a half an hour chat with him,
Wonderful.
I would be very
Wonderful.
grateful.
Superb. So yes, StoryFlection.
So the process that I was talking about, right? StoryFlection, your ability to reflect on your own life stories and learn from them, and then narrate those in your communication. The most important audience of things that are happening to us, of our own stories, is ourselves. You are your audience. So
Okay.
if a story teaches you something,
Hmm.
if it means
Yeah.
something to you, okay, then that story is something that you can go ahead and narrate to others.
Okay.
Too many times I think we think of borrowed wisdom all the time कि मैंने चलो आज मुझे कुछ talk देना है, quotes,
Yeah.
best quotes on this thing, and we
And now too, you have ChatGPT to even
100%, those three, it's become even
get
more
your
easier.
stories. Yeah.
But in the era where there is chat GPT, AI and all of that, I think people who have a unique voice and the ability to say things that only they can say
Okay.
are the ones who will be considered great communicators, or are the ones who will be considered great leaders by people as well. So
Okay.
Rajiv Bajaj has that ability of StoryFlection. I mean, StoryFlection without, I think, that term becoming anything or
Yeah.
becoming a thing that he's learned. I think he does a lot of that on his own, because he himself in one interview confessed that he maintains a diary, a black
Okay.
diary, where he writes things that, like interesting movie scenes or quotes or some knowledge or wisdom that somebody has given to him.
Yeah.
And every year he changes that diary. And his first homework in the new year is to transfer everything that was there in the previous year's diary into the new one,
Oh,
which he says is his revision.
Wow.
And then he writes new things as well.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I can go on about Rajiv Bajaj as well.
Yeah.
So,
So is it right in saying that some people are natural storytellers or born storytellers?
See, I think everybody is a born storyteller.
Okay.
Because
But the effectiveness varies.
Yeah, how many stories do we use? I think the challenge is that eventually we stop using stories and anecdotes in our communication, especially when it comes to business. And everybody, given the right prompt, given the right setting.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a workshop that I was doing for this company called Saks Retail. And it was a bunch of, middle to senior leadership. which was a part of that workshop. And there was this guy. I won't share his name for confidentiality purposes.
Yeah.
But very well spoken, really smart communicator and all that. And we happened to ask a question. I happened to ask a question that who's a teacher that you remember who's had a great impact on you in your life? Uh, and that's when he narrated the story of a teacher who he had a lisp. He used to stammer a lot as a kid, and he was bullied by kids around him because of
Okay.
all those things. But he narrated the story of a teacher who actually kept on encouraging him, kept on telling him how to overcome the lisp, how to use certain techniques to be able to speak better, etc. And in that moment, nobody in the group had known that this was his life story. So someone who you thought is a good communicator, and you're probably not battling a second eyelid to think that what must be his struggle to become a competent communicator the way he is. But when he narrated that story, we got to know so much about him. Now, whether you are an introvert, extrovert, whatever you are, all of us have our stories that we can narrate and things that we have learned from, things that have created an impact. You just need the right questions. You just need the right platform. And once it becomes a habit, you actually utilize that to become a better leader as well,
Okay.
or a better entrepreneur, or more effective professional. Yeah.
So as you mentioned that everyone is a good storyteller, but probably not everyone is able to narrate it in the right way, right? So if someone is wanting to tell his or her story, what are some common pitfalls that they generally face, and how can someone overcome those?
So common pitfalls, I would say that let's look at founders or leaders.
Yeah, because you've been dealing with a lot of founders and
there are lessons from that for everyone. But even if you look at business executives or founders,
do you want to explain this with an example so that people can relate more?
Sure. So what you don't need an example to share this, but the thing is that a lot of times what happens that we are self-indulgent when it comes to communication. Right? If you're a startup founder, you will say my brand does this, my brand does that, etc., which is not the best way to talk about your brand, because what happens is that you are thinking of your brand as the hero of the story. Mostly, if you see a lot of founders and leaders, business executives actually think that their brand or their company is the hero of the story, which is not right. That is not the right approach, because then you become self-indulgent while you speak, while you pitch, while you narrate your stories, and nobody wants to work with someone who thinks he's the hero of the story. We all want to work with mentors because we believe we are the hero of our own lives. So that switch that you have to make, in the sense that that how do you actually present your audience as the hero of the story, as opposed to yourself or your brand, and in that story how do you present your brand as the mentor, which helps your audience achieve his or her utopia, is what is the main switch that a lot of people have to make. The other challenge that I think a lot of people face when it comes to storytelling, a lot of people think storytelling matlab bragging. मैंने Ferrari ले ली.
So me
I'm
bragging
so cool.
about myself.
Yeah, I'm so cool. So a lot of people mistake storytelling for bragging, but storytelling cannot be more further than bragging. And I'll tell you why. The simple thing, the heart of a story is conflict. If there is no conflict, there is no story. If I say that I worked for a few years and today I'm owning a Ferrari, right? Then I'm what most people or a lot of people would call a douchebag. They will not want to interact with me. कि भाई वो आ रहा है, थोड़ा दूर रहते हैं, तो बहुत पकाएगा. We have those kind of people in our lives, right? But if the same person, let's say, says that, I remember when I was growing up, We were a family of 4: me, my mother, my parents,
Yeah.
my sister, and I. And every time that we have to go somewhere, there was a family function, or we wanted to go to the cinema, we would go on our scooter, Bajaj Chetak or whatever.
Yeah.
And my sister and I used to stand, and we always used to jostle for space. And I knew that while we were not poor exactly, but money was always in short supply.
Yeah.
And those were the days that I decided that someday I'm going to give all the comfort and everything that my parents deserve. And today, when I'm taking my dad out on a ride in a Ferrari,
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how happy I am.
Yeah.
The same person, the same Ferrari, everything
same
remains the
outcome.
same. Yeah, the same outcome.
Yeah.
But just that you focused and shared the conflict is what makes you a hero.
Okay.
If you don't share the conflict, you become somebody who's bragging. So
Correct.
conflict. So there are these two things which I think, as a communicator, as a leader, or as an entrepreneur, you
So
need to
bragging
remember.
is okay until unless you are not bragging about yourself, but your customers are probably bragging about how good you are.
100%, of course, yeah.
That is good. And what you very rightly mentioned is that people don't want to be sold.
Yeah.
Don't want to be sold. But if I'm taking an example of a startup, if I'm their target audience, I don't want to be told that these are my features. Today's generation is very well aware, very well researched. They want to be sold on the benefits of that they are going to get
Right.
as a customer.
Right. Yeah.
Correct? Only then probably they'll be able to connect with your story or your product. And your sale is the ultimate end goal. To hona hi hai, sale to hona hi hai, but that is a outcome of a different benefit that you have sold to them, not just your product or a feature.
Right. And even in that, like for instance, if you are able to narrate a contextual story of someone else using your product and how his or her life has become better because of that, and you don't even talk about, हमारे इसमें 12 MB क्या है, megapixel camera है and stuff. You show a photo.
Correct.
So show don't tell is what happens with stories.
Yeah.
As opposed to narrating or keeping on bragging about your product and its features. It's important to show people what it does. And that happens, I think, in a really good way with stories. Of course, if you narrate it in the right way.
Correct. So, Sachin, you said that there are different storytelling structures or techniques or methods, right? So, if I'm talking about from a startup's perspective, okay, a startup goes through from a different stage, right? From the inception, they have an idea, then they start talking it about to people, then they grow, then they raise funding, or then they've reached a stage where they become a unicorn, right? So at different stages, are there certain defined ways of storytelling, or any kind of a story technique can be applied to any stage? How is it? If I'm talking about from a structure perspective.
See, I wish it was like that.
Okay.
To be very honest, I think a lot of people, we all love templates, right? कि बोलो ठीक है, ये situation है, ये template use करो, or you will get the right kind of outcome. But while I think templates are good, you can use them. I think a lot of times every situation, every startup is different, and there needs to be a lot more work that is done to understand your situation, your audience, your stage, to be able to narrate the right kind of story. So I would stay away from saying कि अगर आप अर्ली स्टेज स्टार्टअप हो तो आपको ये वाला टेम्पलेट यूज करना चाहिए, अगर आप लेट स्टेज हो तो ये वाला यूज करना चाहिए, एंड ऑल दैट. आई वुड स्टे अवे फ्रॉम दैट.
Okay.
But yes, there are some generalizations that can be made.
Okay.
So two business or brand storytelling models that I tend to use, or the ones that I like, are, one is called Story Brand. It's also
Story
a book.
brand. Okay.
Yeah, it's also a book called Building a Story Brand
Okay.
by Donald Miller.
Okay.
It basically looks at the customer as the hero of your journey, and your brand as the mentor, right? So who's the hero? What does he or she want? What are the problems for the hero to achieve those things? and who's creating these problems. So who's the villain in the story? What's your brand? Your brand is a mentor. Mentor has authority and credibility.
Correct.
So you showcase that. And what's the mentor's plan? And once you have the mentor's plan, then what is the utopia that the hero will be able to see if he or she walks with you?
Okay.
And what happens if they maintain status quo, which basically means that they choose not to work with you.
Correct.
So that's a very interesting way of looking at your story. It also throws up a lot of other elements, like for instance, जो villain वाला part है, if you're able to figure out the villain, the right
Okay.
kind of villain, and this villain is not necessarily competition all the time.
Okay.
It could actually have to do with a mindset. It can be about a certain way of doing things.
Okay.
It can be all those things. So sometimes just talking against the villain. अभी mostly क्या होता है कि we try to pitch our brand and all that, but sometimes when you just talk against a well defined and relatable villain, and that everyone thinks that is a villain in my life for that particular context of your product,
Correct.
right? Then it's easier to talk against the villain and help people beat the villain rather than talking about your product.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm thinking of an example right
But
now.
is this the same structure that every storyteller follows? Or if you talk about, say, Bollywood movies or say TV commercials, this is the same structure they follow?
See,
There's
this is
a
more to
character.
do with brands.
Okay.
This has got to do with brand storytelling.
Okay.
I don't think so. While it is derived from the hero's journey, and a
Yeah.
lot of your stories that you see in movies, in books, etc., are all hero's journey, which is
Right.
which was popularized by this American mythologist named Joseph Campbell.
Okay.
He wrote a book called A Hero with a Thousand Faces. So all of these the story brand etc. is derived from that,
Okay.
but in the context of business and brand communication.
Right.
Now villain ka example, like let's say for instance, I worked with a brand called Deconstruct Skincare.
Right.
It's a science-based skincare brand from Bangalore,
Right.
founded by Malini, who was an IIT Kharagpur alum. Fantastic founder. She came to me in 2021 saying, Sachin, I want to build a science-based skincare brand, but don't know how to articulate it. Can we work together? Now, in that story, what we realize is the villain in an educated Indian woman's life who lives in metros, from a skincare perspective, are all these mass market beauty brands who say, "ये skin cream लगा लो, 4 shade गोरे हो जाओ, सारे interview पार कर जाओ,"
Yeah.
and all that, right? So that's what that is your villain. So sometimes just talking against the villain, that as a woman you don't need to submit to the fact that आप गोरे हो गए तो ही आप successful हो गए,
Okay.
etc. So that can become your communication plank. So what I like about Story Brand is that I don't know how Donald Miller thinks of it. I've only read his book. That each of the elements, the villain, the hero, the mentor's authority, credibility, all those elements that you get out of doing that exercise can be utilized in your brand's communication in many different ways, on social media,
Okay.
in your emailers, in your conversations,
Yeah.
etc. Now, to Malini's credit, when we created the story was information over impulse. That we provide information to you about what you apply on your skin, and we are promising that we'll never make you buy anything on an impulse, which is what most mass market beauty brands do. कि आप ये skin cream लगाओ और अपने सपनों का राजकुमार आपको मिल जाएगा, and things like that, right?
Right.
So Deconstruct as a brand makes that promise that we'll provide information but not make you buy anything on an impulse.
Okay.
But because of the work that we did together and what Malini discovered, she also started building her team around this mission that we are building products for the information-seeking consumer.
Okay.
Yeah. So your story, essentially, if you get it right, can also become your strategy as a company, as
Okay.
a startup.
So to get your strategy right, you probably need to get your story right. To get your story right, in your story, you need to have a villain. But what if I'm a startup founder? How do I identify the right villain? Because it sometimes does happen, right? Ke you are fighting a wrong battle with a wrong villain and you won't get that outcome. So how
So
as a
again, the
startup
villain,
founder will you
again, the villain
find
is not in your life, in your startup's life
okay,
or your brand's life. The villain is in the customer's life.
yeah.
You are helping the customer fight the villain. You are not fighting the
Right.
villain.
So how do I as a startup founder will identify a villain in my customer's life? Maybe let's take a consumer brand so that more people can relate.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe say a luxury watch brand. Yeah.
When I can give an example, I mean, I've done this work multiple times over. So if you look at an Airbnb,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, again a
Airbnb
consumer brand.
it says belong anywhere.
Right.
The villain in Airbnb story are hotels.
Hmm.
In fact, in the earlier days, it said that their internal tagline was F hotels.
Hmm.
Uh, So the idea was that if you go to a hotel,
Right.
whether you go in New York or Navi Mumbai, inside the hotel it'll feel the same.
Yeah.
Does not give you a sense of place, and all people have plastic smiles because they've been forced to smile
Yeah.
at you. And that's not why we travel. We travel for serendipity. We travel for new experiences and things like that. And Airbnb is going to help you fight this villain of boring hotels
Yeah.
and help you have a great, authentic experience while you travel. So that's the villain in the customer's life,
Customer's life.
and
Okay.
Airbnb is helping them fight that.
Right. So my again question is, how do you, as a founder, how do you identify that?
So like I said, so if you do this
Matlab,
entire
research
process,
is probably one way
Yeah,
of doing it,
one
but
way,
apart from research, because then these are all loose ends, right? You don't have a constructive or a fixed answer to it.
no, there are fixed answers to it. So for
Okay.
instance, if you do the entire story brand process, right? So first you have to understand what is it that your hero wants from life
Okay.
in context of your product. Second is what are the obstacles to him getting what he or she wants.
Right.
Then you have to ask yourself who is placing these obstacles in the hero's path.
Okay.
Okay, so for instance, now let's just look at Airbnb. Airbnb, people who are traveling want authentic and real experiences, which makes them richer, right, in terms of their travel and life experiences. That is what they want. And what comes in the way of that? What comes in the way of that is that every time that you go and stay, you are having a very sanitized, boring experience at a hotel. So you identify that hotel is the villain in your hero's story.
Yeah.
And you are helping them win. Of course, you have to iterate this, you have to sit down and discuss, you probably need to talk to a few customers to realize this, etc., etc. All of those things are there. But if you actually follow this entire thing and try to figure out who is the source of all the product, who does not necessarily mean a person or a competitor. Like I said, it could be a mindset. So for instance, mass market beauty brands talking down to educated Indian women for their skin color,
right,
is the villain in their life. So that's not necessarily just about a particular brand. It's about this mindset that औरतों को तो मतलब गोरा होना है. That is what you're trying to
narrative
fight.
has been fed by many brands since a long time.
Right, but it's also because that mindset exists in society, right? It's not like brands in many ways are a reflection of the society and not the other way around. I mean,
but now that the generation is changing, the narrative has to change.
So then that mindset is the villain. So you have to figure out what is the villain who's putting an obstacle in your hero's way, and then you try to fight that villain, or at least call that villain out in your communication.
Okay, so now that we've spoken about deconstruct as a brand, and we spoke also about Airbnb, right, which is related to travel. I would like to bring your attention to this article that we had found while doing some research, and this article said this Indian dude is going to visit 12 countries in 12 months and do 12 things that scare him. What is this article about? Do you want to share this?
Right. Yeah. So that's a story from a different time.
Okay.
I actually...
Whose story is this, by the way?
My story. So like I said, in 2014, end of 2014, I quit
Mm.
my PR career to do something called the 12 project, 12 months,
Okay.
12 countries, 12 challenges.
Mm.
So this article was written by BuzzFeed
Okay.
before I started that journey. So eventually I went to about 14 countries.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 14 countries. Yes, 14
Hmm.
countries in 18 months, and I took 8 challenges. I couldn't complete all 12.
Mm.
So those that most of my travels were in Latin America, but I did travel to Thailand to learn rock climbing.
Mm.
In India also, I have taken trains to the last railway direction in every
Wow.
major direction. So from Bombay to Kanyakumari, from Kanyakumari, which is the last railway
Yeah.
station in the south, I went to Lido in Assam, which is the easternmost passenger railway station in the country.
Wow.
And then from there, I went to Baramulla in Kashmir, which is the northernmost railway station in the country.
Mm.
I came down to Gujarat, but I missed the the western one, which is Okha.
Okay.
Yeah, but someday I'll go there. But after that, I went to Latin America. I learned music. I wrote a lot of stories about syncretic religions. So there are
Okay.
these religions where African faiths and Christian faiths are mixed together.
Mm.
So they are called syncretic religions like Candomblé, Umbanda, Santeria, or a lot of the music that comes from Brazil, like your batucada,
Mm.
and all of that actually find its origin in ancient African faith ceremonies and stuff like that. Very fascinating. Then I traveled from Brazil. I traveled to Bolivia. Then I went to Peru, where I participated in a fighting festival
Wow.
called Takanakui.
So, what was your purpose of going on to tour to 12 different countries?
So the entire idea was to just so while I wanted to travel,
Mm.
I did not want to just travel. Like I
Okay.
just did not want to pick up my bag and keep going from one place to another
Mm.
without a specific purpose. I said I wanted to use this year like my MBA in the real world.
Wow.
All my friends were telling me during that time that you've done well for yourself in the PR career. Now the next step is you should do an MBA and then you should join a corporate in the marketing or in the communications department.
Okay.
And I would always tell them the last thing I want to do now is to go back to a classroom. So when I was in school and all that, I was fairly academic, to be very
Okay.
honest. So I said I'm going to do my MBA in the real world.
Okay. So, has
Which-
this experience helped you in storytelling
100%.
and what you're doing right now?
Yes, it has. In fact, most of my workshops start with the video
Okay.
of me participating in that fighting festival in Peru.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that. I think somewhere on LinkedIn or you've put it in a story sometimes.
Right,
as well.
right. Yes, I do narrate that story. So that is a way for me to actually grab.
How
people's
long did you
attention.
last in that fight?
That's an
Sorry for that embarrassing question.
embarrassing question. Yes. Grand total of 15 seconds.
When you said grand total. Huh? So out of this entire experience of 12 months, 12 stories, what was your most challenging and most rewarding experience?
Most challenging. So most challenging definitely was the train project.
Okay.
Because
In India?
In India, yes.
Okay.
Because I was living on trains every night. I was sleeping on trains. Even when I was, let's say, if there was one day gap or a break, etc., I was staying in railway dormitories and all that.
Okay.
And after I think the 15th day, I pretty much was disoriented. I just felt like, I was just traveling. I did not have any sense of place and all that. For me, everything was just like a moving picture, and I just wanted to get done. It was very challenging. I don't
And
think
I'm
I'll
sure this was before your marriage, right?
Of course, yes. So I think the most rewarding or the most important takeaway from my trip that marriage brings me to that answer is that my wife, her name is Sarika Sharma. She's
Okay.
a recruiter for middle and senior leadership in education industry. She used to, we were known to each other
Okay.
because we are family friends. But I think she started getting interested in me because of these travels, because she used to follow my travels very closely on Facebook and elsewhere. And I think when I came back to India, we met again for the first time, and she was very happy to meet me because she wanted to hear stories from my journey. And that's what I think started the spark, and that's 12 Project is probably the reason I'm married to
So what was the biggest lesson that you learned in that journey?
biggest lesson that I learned in that journey.
Because you said you wanted to learn from the real life examples, right?
Yeah,
You didn't want to go back to classrooms.
I think what I learned from that journey was the ability to deal with uncertainty, which is something that most of us do not have.
Yeah.
And though I've not read the book, I think
And most of us should have.
should have, yes.
Yeah.
There's this guy called Talib, right? He's written a book called Anti-Fragile.
Okay.
And his hypothesis is that a cab driver who makes money on the go, who does not know how much money he's going to make on a certain day, is actually stronger than a corporate executive who makes lakhs or whatever at the end of every month. Because when the corporate executive loses his job, he's going to be more distraught. He's going to be broken completely, as opposed to a cab driver who may not go without passengers or will not go without money for a few days. So I mean, of course, each to their own, but I think he says something to the effect is that the biggest drug that we've been fed is the
Certainty.
monthly salary. Because we are so used to that. But taking that to a larger context, because I think he speaks about it in larger context also, is that that you have to, what the travel taught me. I'm not saying that I have that on my own. I was much like everyone else.
Correct.
But what I learned from the trip is that, there were times when I would reach a place and I would face some problems or some challenges.
Correct.
It was on a very tight budget that I was doing the trip. And every time I would feel that इस सिचुएशन से तो बाहर निकल ही नहीं पाऊंगा. This is the worst that will happen. But every time things would change. And what I realized over a period of time is that, see, as long as you have food on the table and you have a healthy body,
correct,
okay, and you have people you care for are around you and they are in good spirits and they are with good health, nothing matters.
Nothing matters.
You can pursue whatever you want to pursue, because no matter what challenges you get on the way, all that matters are those 2 or 3 things: whether you have food on the table, whether you're healthy, and whether people around you who you care for are healthy.
Correct.
If these things are ticked, then it doesn't matter whether achieving something takes 1 year or 10 years.
Correct.
So that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. So for instance, my journey also, I feel what I started with quitting PR, I still not over. It still probably will take me a few more years to get to the place where I feel that, oh, now this chapter is completely over and I can start a new chapter. But I'm okay with the uncertainty of it taking longer than what I expected it to take. And that, I think, the ability to deal with uncertainty is the biggest lesson. And that's one of the reasons why we've taken a lot of life decisions different from which other people find difficult to take. So our entire family moved from Bombay to Mysore. Now we run a service apartment there. Our life there is very different from what my life was here in Bombay. But it's closer to what I want my life to be and my family's life to be. But most people don't take the first step because they are worried whether it will work out or not. And most situations or more decisions are a two-way door, right? You can always come back and correct that decision. So you should not get so worried with the uncertain nature of life. In fact, you should embrace it, because more often than not, good things come out of it.
I want to ask you about a situation, because I think a lot of startups, when we talk about storytelling, they might find different situations. So, talking about one situation where, if say I am a startup founder, I'm based in India, I'm working with products which are largely of Indian origin, connected with the roots and culture of India and villages of India. And you face a situation that you want to expand internationally. How can I build a story for myself?
So when you're talking about, let's say, when you're talking to a local audience, it's of course about culture, rituals, etc., etc. But when you're taking the same brand or same products to a larger international audience, then of course the country story becomes important, because the country is something that most people will identify with. They may not have the nuanced understanding of specific local things.
Yeah.
So how do you actually build a country and its association kind of story with the product is something
Okay.
that you can think of. So for instance, if I'm going to, let's say, talk about I don't know, I'm going to take Nanjangud Rasabade. It's a GI tag bananas which get produced in Nanjangud, which is very, very close to Mysore.
Okay.
Right now, if I now in and around Mysore, people understand that. Okay, they understand how good the bananas are and why you should pay a premium on them, etc. But now, if you are taking those bananas to an international market, expecting people to understand Nanjangud Rasabale is a bit difficult. You probably need to get it associated with India, right? And talk about the Great Indian Banana or something like that.
Okay.
So you have to, I think a very good book to read from a communication perspective is Made to Stick by
Made to
Dan and
Stick.
Heath Chip.
Okay.
And they say something really interesting in that. There's like, when you are dealing with anything in as far as communication is concerned,
Okay.
you have to make the familiar a little strange. By strange, I mean interesting. Okay. So it could be, the mug that you do all the time.
Yeah.
You've seen these mugs. But now, how can I take this mug and make it a little more interesting, or talk about the fact that the material used or the clay used in this mug actually comes from a specific beach in Ratnagiri or something like that.
Yeah.
So you're taking the familiar and making it a little strange and a little interesting. But when you have something which is strange, which is completely different, that people do not know anything about it,
Right.
then you actually take that and make it familiar.
Okay.
So for instance, that Nanjangud Rasabale, when it goes to an international market, you could probably just say that, first there was yoga, then there was incense, and now there are bananas from India, which is going to. So how do you make it more familiar for people? There is a sweet spot between familiarity and strangeness, which every brand, every product has to hit. Because if you're too familiar, then people don't think you're special. But if you're too special and you're going towards the extreme, then people find it difficult to pick you up or try you out, because they feel that यार ये तो बहुत ही समझ में नहीं आया, ये कुछ अलग ही है, या तो कुछ ज़्यादा ही extreme पे है.
Okay.
So those things are there. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. One more example or one more situation I would like to give you. You worked in PR. You've been now working in storytelling. And if you can recollect a disaster that our favorite Maggi noodles that I'd faced, I think long time back.
Right.
It was in 15 or so?
Yeah, I guess.
Probably,
Yeah, somewhere around that time.
So how can a brand recover? We've all seen how Maggi recovered. They did their, those lab tests again, and they proved that they had no MSG and all of it. And then they build their new narrative again, emotionally connecting. But how can a startup do that? If you're faced with a PR disaster in your industry or for your brand itself, how can storytelling rebuild it for them?
So first and foremost, I think it's easier said than done, because I've been on that side of the table as well while working as a PR person for brands. Is that there's just so much happening and there's so much pressure that sometimes you lose objectivity, and there are too many cooks that spoil the broth.
Yeah.
In the case of crisis, I think it's important to have a sort of a war room, saying that these are the 5 people who are going to work on this, and everything else needs to be shut out.
Okay.
You need to be able to address the situation directly, either with consumers, media, etc., and understand what is happening. And a lot of times, I think it's fairly simple, being authentic. If you've made a mistake, you accept that you made a mistake, and you also give specific steps in which you are taking corrective actions.
Yeah.
That by this time. So the thing is that what happens with a lot of corporates is, at least with corporates, I feel, is that they come up with one letter
Yeah.
which reads like every other letter that every other corporate has ever written.
Hmm.
So people know that it means nothing.
Nothing.
It's a
Correct.
bullshit. Somebody in the PR department has written this,
Hmm.
and it means nothing. So that's where I think they irk the audience even more.
Hmm.
But being authentic, and if it's a mistake, saying that yes, we made a mistake, but
Accepting
we
it.
accept it,
Yeah.
and this is what we are doing to be able to correct that, and this it will happen by this particular time. So specifics is
Okay.
something that people really appreciate, in my opinion. So that's what you need to get at, and I think broadly the same thing applies to a startup as well. Even if you are a new product and you've made a mistake, then you accept the mistake that you've made, but you also showcase specific corrective actions, and then over a period of time ensure that you don't make those mistakes again, so that people realize that, hey, you know what, I mean, they've actually tried and they are doing way better. And even in this, I think there was a very good lesson from Airbnb when the pandemic was happening, where they had to let go of, I think, 1/3 or 1/4 of their staff, 1/4 of their staff. Now, letting people go, whether it's a pandemic or anything, is never good news for the company. You know, you'll always get bashed in media, and rightly so. I think firing people is not a good thing.
Correct.
So, but when Airbnb did it, Brian Chesky actually wrote a letter to his employees, and he came and he showed up in front of his employees, and he said that if you get an email in the next 2 days, it means that you've been asked to leave. But understand that it's not because you are not good. You are great at what you do. It's just that the situation is such we cannot help. But we understand how difficult this time is going to be for you, and hence we are going to take these 3 steps. So step number 1 was that you could keep your laptop, because Brian Chesky said that when you are trying to look for a new job, a laptop is a really important machine, and we don't want you to now invest in a new machine if this is the machine that you were using for yourself. That's number 1. Number 2, they created a Airbnb style listings website where they had put pictures, profile, testimonials of team members, of bosses, of employees who'd been asked to leave. So you could just send that particular link
to someone
where
you're applying.
Where you're applying, to showcase that my current company still supports me a lot.
Nice.
And the third thing was 1/3 of the HR team of Airbnb was actually going to be focused on helping these employees who were asked to
Find
leave
a new job.
find a new job. So if you see, I mean, they turned it over its head, right? I mean, there were very specific actions that they took, and they did things that people don't expect. So the other thing that I say, that when you want to trigger stories about yourself, is that you ask yourself, what is it that the audience wants but does not expect you to do. So just as when Zomato started period leaves, it's not like periods were a thing that women were not discussing. I know my wife would always talk about how she felt a bit embarrassed that she would tell her boss that I'm not feeling well today.
Correct.
Because she would have to lie every time that she had period pains, right? And then Zomato came along and said, but we never expected, like even before that, we never expected that companies or big companies would actually normalize this. And that's what Zomato did. And when they did that, they got a lot of PR for it. So if you can figure out what is it that the audience wants but does not expect you to do, and if you do that thing, it is almost sure that you will get a lot of good stories. But again, you have to have a good PR team, etc. All of those things are
to
there.
tell those stories for you. So one thing that I understand from this is that what makes a good story great is being genuine.
Yes, being genuine. But also I do have a word of caution when it comes to being genuine, because there is a level of acceptability to being genuine. अब अगर आप बोलते हो कि यार I am a sadist, I love hitting throwing dogs at stones at dogs. I mean, that's not something that anybody is going to accept, right? So genuine also needs to be within the context of what is acceptable and what is not. So while it's good to push boundaries, but it's also important to ask yourself questions that whatever I feel or do, my behavior, is it story worthy or not? So, and I keep saying this over and over again, that no matter how much we learn in terms of storytelling as communication, the most important stories that we ever tell are the actions that we take. So if our
Okay.
actions are not in line with the communication or the stories that we narrate, then people will see through, because the
Yeah.
action is a more important story than the one that you narrate all the time as well.
Okay. So then your stories need to be supported by your actions.
Yes. In fact, I would say your stories need to be led by actions.
Led by actions. Okay.
Narratives need to follow the action and not the other
Okay.
way around.
Wonderful. Superb. So some great insights that you've shared with us, Sachin, today.
Thanks.
I just have one last or maybe two last things to ask you. Yeah. And very short.
Sure.
Okay. You worked with different brands over your career of 2 decades now. Yeah. So one, which is your favorite brand who does storytelling the best? That probably the viewers can follow now.
To me, that answer is simple. If it's an international brand, I would say Airbnb.
Okay.
I've already narrated some of their anecdotes on this podcast. I think from an Indian perspective, I think Tata's actually does a fairly good job.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the credit goes to this gentleman called Harish Bhatt. Who was the brand custodian of Tata Sons.
Okay.
And, he has so many resources at his disposal as somebody who's the brand custodian of the entire group.
Yeah.
Yet he narrates stories. He himself is a writer. He's written, I think, two books at least about Tatas and Tata stories. And he keeps narrating stories on LinkedIn as well. So a lot of the things that you know now. So for instance, I got to know that I didn't know that Lakme was an Indian brand.
Yeah.
And do you know what Lakme means?
No, you can please enlighten us.
It's the French word for Lakshmi, goddess Lakshmi. And this is something that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had called J.R.D. Tata, if I'm not mistaken, and said that all our upper class or women, they use French cosmetics.
Okay.
We need to actually have an
Indian brand.
Yeah. But they did realize that it needs to have a certain appeal and aspiration.
Wow.
Hence, they called it Lakme, but it actually means the French name for goddess Lakshmi.
And we've seen so many such examples where we think that these are foreign brands, but these are Indian brands.
Right.
Or otherwise. Like for Bata, it is otherwise, right? We think Bata is an Indian brand, but it is not.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And last thing, as I mentioned, I want to ask you two things. One last thing is, which is that Indian brand or an Indian startup that you would like to work with on their storytelling narrative?
I mean, I'd like to work with a lot of them. I think I'd be very happy to work with Bajaj for sure. I think 60 to 70% of the reason would be Rajiv Bajaj if I have an opportunity to work directly with him. Rest of it, see, the thing is that if I know that a brand needs better storytelling, then I probably don't know about the brand. If the brand is already good at its narrative, its storytelling, etc., I probably already know. And then of course, within that there is something that they can do better. But I know a lot of, I don't want to take names because these are brands which are doing really well and which are serving the customers very well and are sizable, but they actually lose out the storytelling or the PR war. They are not known by their audiences as much because they are not good at this. So there are many brands like that, but I don't want to name them because I'll be putting the spotlight on them. But there are some brands, thankfully, that.
But you want to work with Bajaj?
Yeah, Bajaj for sure. But that is mostly because to as much to contribute, but also to learn from Rajiv Bajaj.
Absolutely wonderful. So I would like to just end this by one line that I think that has stuck to me with this conversation of more than I think 1.5 hours that we've had is about leaders. Leaders lead through storytelling, and I think that's what I have got from today.
Yeah. In fact, my corporate program that I do for middle and senior leadership, it's called Lead with Stories. How to be nice but effective.
Wonderful.
N is for negotiate. In that nice, N is
Yeah.
for negotiate. I is for inspire. C is for connect, and E is for explain.
Explain.
Yeah,
Negotiate, inspire, connect, and explain.
Yeah.
That's how leaders can motivate and lead.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sachin, once again for joining us today and enlightening us on storytelling and helping us. Probably the viewers might be able to build better stories now after this podcast.
So.
Uh, any just last word of on storytelling that you would want the world to know? Just last word.
There are many different ways in which people are coming to storytelling, and
Yeah.
I think all of them are right. All of them are good.
Yeah.
My message to everyone is that become conscious of your own stories.
Yeah.
A simple thing that everyone can do is every evening, once you're done with your day, before you go to the bed, just take a piece of paper. Like if you have a diary, if you're into journaling, just ask yourself, what was the story-worthy moment of the day?
Okay.
Like, did you find something interesting where you learned something where you felt happy, sad, etc.? That's number one. And then from that, ask yourself, what is the lesson that I learned?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, a story is a vehicle for a message, for a piece of learning. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we grew up, right? Moral learning
Moral
happened
learnings
through
happen
stories.
through story.
And that exists. That happens all the time. We are all learning through stories. The first thing is that you have to learn yourself. The story's audience has to be you.
Yeah.
So if you can just start this process of storyflection on a daily basis, and then start using those stories in your communication. So first you use it in low stakes environments, which is with your family, with your team members. See how people are receiving those stories. And once you're confident that हाँ यार ये story जब मैं narrate करता हूँ तो it creates an impact, then you take it to high stake communication events like big presentations, client pitches, etc.
Perfect.
All of that. So yeah, storyflection is the way to go in my opinion.
All right. Thank you once again, Sachin, for being with us and sparing your time. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us today. I am sure you must have got a lot of lessons around storytelling. Do share with us in the comments what was your most important learned lesson from the storytelling session today. And if you want to get in touch with Sachin, his details are there on the description. You can directly get in touch with him. So I hope you guys are going to use more and more storytelling in your communication. All the best. And thank you so much for watching The Branding Circle.